fever, cough, congestion. When the symptoms keep coming, but you've got to keep going, you can rely on Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One. Just one dose of Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One relieves up to 9 cold and flu symptoms, helping you get on with your day. Need cold and flu relief? Get Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One and Done Relief. It's comeback season. Use as directed.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
If you've had that sound from Babbel before, I bet you do. Babbel is the science-backed language learning app that actually works. With quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel gets you on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. With over 16 million subscriptions sold and a 20-day money-back guarantee, just start speaking another language with Babbel. Right now, up to 55% off your Babbel subscription at babbel.com/Spotify podcast. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify podcast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
I think what we're going to be seeing in Wisconsin is going to be a disproportionate turnout by the younger generation, disproportionate in the sense of bigger than their proportions. Whether a student is going to vote left or right, I think it's so exciting to me as a professor to see a younger generation really excited and interested in an election, almost at an unprecedented level.
As University of Wisconsin-Madison political science professor Mordecai Lee explains, young voters in Wisconsin may very well play an influential role in the 2024 election. Why might this be the case? It's a critical swing state in which just a few thousand votes have the power to determine the outcome of the election. In the 2022 midterm elections, Wisconsin's youth voter turnout led the nation. In fact, as explained by Wisconsin Public Radio, over the course of the past 22 years, 10 statewide elections have been determined by less than 30,000 votes. In 2020, this number was even lower, with a presidential margin of victory of less than 21,000 votes. And on the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus alone, there are almost 50,000 students. So how might young Wisconsin voters vote next week, and what precisely is it that they care about? In today's episode, we'll be digging into a discussion on the 2024 election with 3 young Wisconsin voters, each of whom attend the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Welcome back to Nationally. In this limited election series podcast produced by Immigrantly Media, we discuss issues that matter to some of the most overlooked immigrant and minority communities in the U.S. As the election season continues and quickly comes to an end, we'll examine key moments that offer insight into what we can expect next week when the results come in. And shout out to Juan Diego and Sarah for letting me lead this conversation, because as a fellow Gen Z voter myself in this election, Nationally thought it might be appropriate if they passed me the mic to moderate this conversation. So today, I am your host, Sofia Sanchez, and I'd like to introduce you to our 3 guests today. To be fair, I did attempt to include Republican and conservative voices in this episode. Unfortunately, either schedules did not align or not responded to. I also tried to get in contact with those affiliated with the uncommitted voter movement. Unfortunately, the people that I did get in contact with did not feel safe enough to participate, as Congress and universities are cracking down on campus protests. Anyhow, today we're going to be focusing on the diversity and the unique set of perspectives that exist even within a vote for Kamala. As a Gen Z voter myself, I know that older generations might think that we're one-issue voters, or that we're not necessarily engaged, or that we aren't voting from a so-called real-world perspective. But I hope this conversation goes to show that there's a lot of nuance, intelligence, and engagement among young voters. Thank you so much for listening.
My name is Lily, she, they. I'm a senior in college, UW-Madison, and I'm a Democrat.
Okay. How about you, Veer?
My name's Veer. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a junior at UW-Madison, and I'm a Democrat.
Hi, my name's Marina. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also a junior at UW-Madison, and I am also a Democrat.
Thank you so much for being here. Although I understand that the 3 of you are more Democratic, I know that there's also unique ways that you guys differ. So if we could also start by sharing what issues are the most important to you in this upcoming presidential election.
I would like to say Donald Trump, I think he's a threat to democracy, or he doesn't uphold the values that we should want. And I think I would vote for anybody besides him. I've been keeping up with this election, and what I've seen is the Republicans don't really have a policy position on a wide variety of issues. I would say election integrity, like the lies that are being spread by the GOP, the economy, abortion, are the top three issues.
My mom works in hospice and deals with a lot of older people who are suffering from cognitive decline, specifically dementia. And Trump, all the signs. This man is literally rambling on stage, forgetting where he's at. Like, all the stuff that Republicans and some Democrats were criticizing Biden for, he has it tenfold. And to have a man in active cognitive decline in one of the highest seats of power in the country, who's already shown that he's easily manipulated by other men in power, such as Putin and Netanyahu, like that is going to have disastrous effects globally. Trump is a mask-off fascist, and the GOP has shifted so far right that it is literally a threat to democracy. Like January 6th, my family was in the area during that whole incident, and that was just so terrifying. That could happen here. That's something that the CIA normally does elsewhere, and now it's homeward bound.
Yeah, I would definitely say I'm in a similar boat. I will say, though, for up until this August, I've been abroad for a whole year. So honestly, I will be honest in saying that I haven't been the most up to date with this election until I came back.
Let's talk about that, because I know that a lot of people have been feeling a lot of apathy towards politics and this election because they're tired of the same old, same old. Both of these candidates are not necessarily new. They're familiar faces, whether they have actually been president before or currently the vice president. You all identified as Democrats, but is anybody here reluctantly voting for Kamala?
I mean, there's no other option. If there was someone who wanted to give larger concessions to the more left-wing part of the quote-unquote Democratic Party, I would love to vote for them. But because Biden dropped out so late in the race, like Kamala was the only viable option. And she's grandfathered in there. And in a lot of ways, I appreciate Kamala's policies, especially concerning the economy and giving first-time homebuyers loans. I think that's genuinely a very good policy. At the same time, I think she is trying to shift the Democratic Party to a more centrist position to try to gather as many Republicans that are now disenfranchised from this MAGA vote. And it's gotten so amorphous that she's spouting kind of the same anti-immigration rhetoric that the right was back in 2016. It's we'll deport you, but give you an NPR tote bag on the way out. It's like, I think what's bothering me is that she's just so chronically vague, especially on Gaza. She's very much like dancing around the question. I absolutely get it. If you're trying to appeal to both sides, you're not trying to alienate, you're not trying to lose Kufi or APAC money. But in a way, it just feels so Machiavellian that as the Democratic Party, loves to look moral on paper, it just feels a little gross.
In this climate, like, what can she even do about it is the thing. When you have a bill that the Republicans sponsor to fix immigration, and then Donald Trump comes on the back end, shuts this bill down, and says that I want to run on immigration, don't pass our own bill. I think that's super disingenuous. We can't have a person like that run our country. When you have a party led by somebody like that who's ready to torpedo their own agenda just to run on that, I don't know, what can you even do as Kamala Harris to combat that? If you have a voter pool who's being fed lies, how can you even convince them?
Yeah, and I don't disagree with her strategy. It makes sense. I would probably do the same thing if I was in her boat or on her campaign team. But in facing like a fascist, right?
Yeah, I agree.
I feel like that doesn't subvert the necessary criticism that we need to have towards Kamala Harris. in a very constructive manner.
But I
Yeah,
think we should reserve the criticism for after she gets elected, since it's so high stakes. Like if she does,
yeah.
and that's what I feel about Gaza. While I don't agree with many of her positions there, I think that the people who are holding out for a third party vote or abstaining for voting for Kamala Harris because of their disagreement, if they don't see that there would be a clear difference in the way that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump would handle it, I think that's completely false. The reality is there's only two choices, and while both of them are not good, one is clearly going to be worse. So,
It's the classic railroad problem. And at this point, I'm going to choose a centrist over a fascist any day.
exactly.
What have you been hearing on campus, especially at UW-Madison, the university that participated in campus protests back in the spring against the Palestinian genocide? Are there people in your friend groups or that you've been hearing in class that are talking about withholding their votes?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. It's a major concern for the Democratic Party throughout the country, but also I've seen that within my friends here at the university.
And what are those conversations usually like? Is there usually some tension of like, why aren't you using your vote? The lesser of two evils conversation, or is there usually some sensitivity for their stance?
There's way more facets to this election than just the Palestine-Gaza issue. And while I understand that some people may want to abstain their vote simply because of that, it might be a very big issue to them, and it is a very big issue. I feel like so much is at stake apart from that, that I really plead them that they need to cast their ballot in the right direction, especially in a state like Wisconsin.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think that maybe you would have a different stance if you were in a state that wasn't swinging?
My home state is Massachusetts, and I know a lot of people there who are abstaining their vote because of the Palestine issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there it's not as high stakes of an election. So
I'm from Minnesota, so another solidly blue state, only state that didn't elect Reagan. So yeah, I was just like, I have friends back home that are abstaining from voting on the topic of Gaza, and I don't agree with them. We've had many arguments about it, but ultimately, because it's Minnesota, statistically, we're going to get those electoral votes no matter what.
I'm from Iowa, which used to be a swing state, but it's been red recently. So growing up, a lot of my classmates were Republican. And I feel like that's when I was more involved in trying to understand what was on ballots even before I could vote.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I feel like that's what solidified that I didn't like Trump then, so I definitely wouldn't like him now.
Mm-hmm.
Like just seeing all his supporters in class, and then like they would be talking about stuff I would deem dumb at the time, and I'd be like, you want him running our country? That's crazy.
Yeah. I think, Marina, when you and I initially spoke, you talked about immigration and abortion being important issues to you. And abortion is a topic that Trump has flip-flopped a couple of times on. But immigration is not something that has changed. I think he's always been pretty racist and very conservative with his policies. But to stay on the topic of Gaza, I think, as I've also talked with people beyond our generation, I think they tend to get the idea that we are often one-issue voters, or that we have tunnel vision because of the conflict in Israel and Gaza. And I guess I want to know, among the three of you, what is something that you think that other generations have missed or don't understand about Gen Zs or about young voters? But also, what is something that you think Kamala Harris has not paid attention to among young voters?
I feel like she hasn't done a good job in targeting young men. It might be the fact that Donald Trump and his campaign has done a better job of campaigning to young men. I've seen recently that this is the first election where young men in my age range have gone over 50% Republican to Democrat. And this is the first election that's happened in recent times.
I've also noticed this among Latinos broadly, that there's generally more of a rightward shift, We've also been seeing this in South Asian communities. I've also seen Kamala Harris trying to get on Joe Rogan's show and like trying to talk more to young voters through that way. She was recently on Call Her Daddy and trying to talk to young women there. So there has been more just recently, like in the last month, I've noticed that there's been more of a push for young voters, whether that be men or women. But I'm curious because there's also been a lot of like celebrity engagement with this election, and not just in typical senses. They've had a whole brat movement this past summer, you know, having all these memes about whether it be coconuts or just taking the latest trend and trying to use it for their good. Does celebrity engagement matter to you? And how much do memes, influencers, or other online voices impact your view on candidates or issues?
I mean, I think I might be a little more cynical about
Mm-hmm.
it. But it does feel a little pandery in the sense that this isn't policy. This isn't going to help me put a down payment on a house. This isn't going to help me with college loans or protect democracy, especially with the whole TikTok being forced to be sold to a US company in order for the US to censor it better. It feels a little dystopian.
I know, like, she's brought out Eminem, other people. I can see how that might swing votes. And I understand why it's happening, but I mean, at the end of the day, these people are not making our policy or setting our policy, and it's not like tackling the real issues.
I think I can completely agree with them just because personally, I don't necessarily care if a celebrity is engaged or not with Harris, but it does feel nice when a singer I really like is openly towards Kamala Harris, but that doesn't affect me personally.
Something that I noticed exactly before the brat movement craze started this summer is that we were all laughing at Kamala. We were all making fun of her laugh low key and like all these ways that she didn't really answer questions or that she like just was a meme. My friends and I were actually making fun of you. We weren't actually using this as a way to feel connected to you. So I understand, Lily, what you mean by it feeling like pandery. On the other hand, a big issue that does resonate among young voters, specifically young women, is abortion and reproductive rights. If Trump were to say, I'm wholeheartedly for abortion, would that at all impact your vote?
First of all, I feel like it would be a lie if he came out and said that right now. But second of all, I don't want to be tunnel visioned on one aspect just because abortion is one of my big priorities. But I feel like overall, I still feel like Trump just is not the person I would want leading the country.
We know he's pro-abortion for himself. He's paid for probably dozens throughout his lifetime of random women he sexually assaulted throughout his career. And I think the hypocrisy of that, like rights for me, but not for thee, it captures the Republican ideology of trying to control women. And there's that weird new trend of trad wives on TikTok and just like pushing weird strict gender binary that is obviously coming from a very reactionary place that has gained a lot of traction in right-wing circles that I think that, you know, the overturning of Roe v. Wade was just the beginning. The right-wing party has an agenda that they will be enforcing if allowed into these places of power.
Just to wrap up the conversation, which has already gone by way too quickly, we didn't even get to really discuss immigration or the way that both of them have developed more conservative stances. But I want to ask you, how important is this election, whether it be regarding immigration, abortion, foreign policy? How important is this election in your eyes?
I think this is one of the most important elections we've had recently, and I think the stakes are incredibly high. Like, if we look back to the last election, when Donald Trump lost, he claimed there was massive voter fraud. He did not pass the presidency down peacefully, and that led to many negative consequences. Him not starting the transition led to many deaths in COVID. And I think that's just despicable. And if we look to this election, if he loses, I think he's going to do a similar thing. And I I don't think we should ever condone somebody to lead our country who doesn't support democracy, which is very fundamental to us. Apart from that, I think abortion stands no chance if he becomes president. Ukraine stands no chance if he becomes president. And I think as a son of immigrants, I think I could never support Donald Trump. He just doesn't like us.
Where is your family from, Veer?
India.
Is anybody else here a child of immigrants?
My dad was born in Germany. I think because he was a white immigrant, a lot of this rhetoric isn't directed towards him because he was the quote unquote right type of immigrant. And a lot of this is racially motivated.
Yeah. My dad is from Japan and my mom is from the Philippines. But yeah, this kind of goes back to COVID. It didn't matter where we were from. The fact that we were like East Asian, they just lumped us all together. And that was not fun to deal with at all.
Yeah, there were many hate crimes towards East Asians and Asians more generally during that time. So I guess for both of you, Lily and Marina, how does this election resonate with you?
Project 2025, which is something that we didn't really get to, is terrifying. That's the playbook of basically filling the federal government with Trump sycophants. And that is the greatest threat to democracy that I've had in my lifetime. This is my second presidential election, third if you count the time my dad let me fill in the Obama bubble in 2008. Sorry, I am one of those illegal voters, but like this election could have ramifications for literal centuries on climate, on war, just the whole shebang.
Marina, how about you?
I think this election is more important just because I'm in Madison right now. Even just going to classes, talking to like anyone. I know a couple of my Minnesota friends, we were all talking about like where we're voting. And my Minnesota friends were just like, oh, I just want to vote back home because it's easier that way. But I was just like, no, this election is important here. Minnesota is going to be blue. You should cast here instead.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Your voices are obviously very important, even in the ways that you influence your peers to go out and vote and cast a vote in Wisconsin. Thank you so much. Happy voting. And I'll let you all get back to class because I know you have it.
Thank you, Sophia.
I do have one more thing.
Yes.
This is for Veer and Marina. I'm having a party at my co-op if y'all want to come tomorrow.
Sure.
And I guess Sophia too, if you're in town.
I won't be in town, but thank you again so much for being part of this. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was our conversation with Gen Z Democrats voting in Wisconsin. It was also our final episode before the election. Yes, next week is Election Day, so the next time you listen to Nationally, Juan Diego and Sarah will be talking to you about the results and President number 47. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Nationally Podcast, brought to you by Immigrantly Media. We hope you like this episode. Nationally releases weekly on Thursdays on all streaming platforms. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share with us, please email them to info@immigrantlypod.com or reach out on our socials at Immigrantly Media on Instagram. You can find me at Sofia Hanalei on all socials. Nationally is produced by Sadia Khan and me, Sofia Sanchez. This episode is written by Emmanuel Monahan. Our sound designer and editor is Juan Velez. The Nationally theme music is by Simon Hutchinson. Additional music is by Epidemic Sound. Thank you so much for listening again, and have a great week.